Why am I pissed at the fancy people at the resorts? Because this shit's going down. Because this shit's going down. This ain't natural, folks. What are they doing? Plasma from the ground. It's not coming from the sky. It's coming from the ground. They're killing the earth. We need earth and nature to breathe. How did this burn?
73 car plasma fire in Texas over the weekend.
We just went for a family day for Saturday. Go to the pumpkin patch, take cute little pictures.
But those cute little pictures Kat Cabana and her sister's family wanted to take never happened. From nowhere.
God. We saw black smoke and we're like, man, that looks like something legit is on fire.
More than 70 vehicles went up in flames.
Oh my goodness. You could hear glass exploding and what I assume was either tires popping or exploding or the gas tank, the gas in people's gas tank exploding. The wind was taking it and just pulling the smoke and the flames and all that, and then it just got bigger and bigger.
It happened at the Robinson family farm near Temple around 1 o'clock Saturday afternoon.
We're like, well, what are we gonna do?
Kat tells us she saw people running towards their cars, trying to save them. Thankfully, no injuries were reported.
People were running to the parking lot.
Did you hear anything in terms of what it could have been?
No, there's been lots of speculation, but everybody, of course, assumes it was a cigarette, but who really knows?
While Kat and her sister's car are ruined.
The windows are gone, all the handles are melted off, tires are gone. But we're okay. Cars can be replaced.
In Granbury, I'm Melanie Basu.
So the Bell County Fire Marshal does say the cause of this fire is not yet confirmed, but it is indeed believed to be from a cigarette that was improperly discarded into the grass. 4 firefighters and 2 other people were treated at the farm for non-life-threatening heat-related injuries. The farm was closed today, but is set to reopen next weekend.
Listen to how she says the windows are gone, the handles are melted off, and the tires are all gone.
While Kat and her sister's car are ruined.
The windows are gone, all the handles are melted off, tires are gone.
So that is what I'm going to go over here in a second, is to show you that all of the glass is gone, which is indicative of a plasma fire. All of the door handles are melted off. Many of the rims have melted. But first I'm going to just show you one other quick news segment.
Right back to that fire. It broke out at the Robinson family farm around 1 o'clock this afternoon. According to some patrons who were there, no injuries or deaths have been reported, but a lot of cars have been damaged. 6 News reporter.
So I'm going to go over a few of these screenshots. One thing I did notice is these big high-tension energy lines. There's also cooling towers right there, which makes it appear that it might be right next to an electric plant, like where they generate the electricity. So all of the cars, every single one of them, is missing 100% of its glass. This one, you can see that, hopefully if it lets me, there's no rim right there. That's the hub. So many of them also have the rims melted off. And this is one of the classic signatures of plasma fires. When it hits cars, it melts the glass out, burns the door handles off, and melts the rims. In many of these pictures, you can see the rivets of melted metal running down alongside the cars. But all of them have all of their glass missing. And the temperature at which this kind of glass melts, it's tempered glass. So it was created at a very high heat to harden it. So this glass doesn't even begin to melt until it reaches much higher temperature than the average car fire burns at. And it didn't just melt some of the glass here and some of it there. 100% of all the glass out of 100% of all the cars that burned is missing. And most of the door handles and most of the rims. Here you can even see that the door handle's missing right there, but we get some closer shots on the door handles. I was just showing you that the rims, front and rear, are gone on that one. And of course, I got the cigarette butt narrative going. Over here you can see little puddles. That's the melted metal. A lot of this over here is also going to be melted metal. This little string right there, That's where the melted metal ran in a puddle. And again, notice all of the glass. There's not even a little bit of glass here and there in some of them. And they're all equally burned. None of them are half burned or 3/4 burned or 1/4 burned. They are all 100% burned. I know this was a plasma fire, so I'm not going to try and belabor the point to those who aren't aware. I'm just pointing it out to those who already know. Some of them, like this one, still has its rim, but the tire is melted. So when she said all the tires are gone, that's because the steel belts in a steel belted radial, those steel belts work like an antenna or an amplifier that turns that rubber to dust. Again, just notice there's no glass in anything. I don't see the rust. Normally this color of the metal often turns to rust. A process of electrolysis using the smoke as a medium of ion exchange. There's a missing rim. Might have even melted the hub right off of that one. That one's missing its rim also. But yeah, these power lines that are going over are directly over these cars. Might have had something to do with it. And at some point, maybe I'm through them. This one's a good shot where you can see a little river of metal coming from the back rim and a little river of metal coming from the front rim. That's where the rims melted, and that's what those two lines are of melted metal that has cooled and solidified. One right here. That was the back rim. And this was the front rim. And I can't find the image where it shows cooling towers. In one of these images, there's a bunch of cooling towers. Like it might be right next to an electric generation facility. I don't know. All I'm just showing you is that 73 cars went up in Texas at the pumpkin patch, and it was definitely a plasma. A quick follow-up video where they gave us much better visual images of the 73 car plasma fire in Texas.
Right to our top story, dozens of cars were destroyed in a massive grass fire over the weekend at the Robinson family farm in Temple. People there were left in shock, forced to watch as flames spread from one vehicle to the next. Now, so many of those families are looking for answers tonight. 6 News reporter Adriana Alexander is live for us at the farm now, where she spoke to the owners and victims whose cars were burned. Adriana, how did this happen?
Well, Bailey, investigators don't know exactly how this fire ignited Saturday. They speculate it might have been from a cigarette, but aren't sure. But of course, that's not what the victims who lost their cars on Saturday are looking to hear at this time. What was supposed to be a fun day at the Robinson family farm turned into a nightmare.
Didn't think anything crazy like this would happen.
Over 70 cars caught fire during the Robinson family farm's annual pumpkin patch event Saturday afternoon. On Monday, those car owners got a look at what was left behind. Helen Robinson, the owner of the Robinson family farm, says they are still figuring out how to handle what happened, but one thing is clear, the farm will not be held liable.
To be able to be operational, and that we are very grateful for. We're very grateful that there were no injuries.
And for those who were forced to leave the event early because of the fire, Robinson is simply asking for patience as they too are still figuring everything out.
This first and foremost.
It looks like they are taking this camera and putting it at certain angles in order to be able to show what they cannot speak of out loud. This camera angle shows the unburned grass here in the foreground and the plasma fired cars in the background. One thing I'll be drawing your attention to on all of these cars is the rust. This rust was also found on cars up to a half mile or a mile away from the Twin Towers. This rust was also on the giant iron beams sticking up out of the rubble pile of the Twin Towers. So much so that Judy Woods labeled it the Cheeto effect because it turns it orange like a Cheeto, and those giant iron I-beams sticking up out of the rubble looked like giant Cheetos. She's also the one that gave us the term dustification. So yes, this energy is directable, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I believe most of it is not directed because I have filmed it in so many different places. And one of my most recent videos where I showed just a single piece of wood plasma fired in the middle of the forest proves It's not being directed. Much of this energy is a random occurrence, but it can be directed, and this may be where the fake alien invasion Project Bluebeam comes into play. They would rather you believe it's an alien invasion, and all these fires that you're seeing, once you start to see it, is ETs, because they can defend you against ETs, or at least the government is your best chance. But if you know that it's a magnetic pole reversal and that there is nothing they can do about it, then you become ungovernable and unruly. So they may end up directing it intentionally to show that it's being directed, and then people get the understanding that it's all directed. I'm 1 in 7 billion people. There is not another single person who has shown that it's happening everywhere, and the primary evidence of it is in the trees. A few other YouTubers have come across this understanding primarily from Paradise, California, which I believe was directed, if nothing else, because they have images of Cal Fire standing in the back of a pickup truck with a rifle with a tripod and a scope, a .50 caliber. In the uniform of Cal Fire, in a Cal Fire truck, standing in the bed with this rifle pointing forward, mounted on the top of the cab, but with a pair of prop sticks, not mounted, but still. What is a Cal Fire person doing with a .50 caliber rifle in the middle of the Paradise fires, indicating it was an operation? And there are other such instances where I believe it is directed also. These plasma fires could very possibly be incorporated into a narrative that people think of as Project Bluebeam, a fake alien invasion. They would much rather you think that than the fact that it's a magnetic pole reversal we're going through. And the PBS Nova special called Magnetic Storm is the best way to introduce people to this understanding of how these pieces of wood that I've lacquered, how these trees come about, and how these burned cars come about, is by referring them to the PBS Nova special titled Magnetic Storm. I talk more about that in a video that I've already recorded that I will post soon. Another thing I found awfully coincidental is Mr. Department of Space Force, who appears here in their news coverage. That's what you call product placement, where Pepsi or Coke wants their product in the hand of a basketball player, so you associate this product with that guy, this product with that guy. This leads into the narrative where you associate Space Force, who's going to defend you against those directed energies. And the fact that he's here wearing his bomber glasses, he's looking like Goose from Maverick, all grown up. So, we'll move along to some more of these images. All of them have the rust, none of them have the glass, and many of them are missing doors and hoods. You can see the entire back hatch of this car is gone. There is at least 3 or 4 or 5 other examples of this that I can show you. The other thing that I'll be pointing out is all of the unburned grass. Here in the middle, you can see that it's fairly unburned compared to over here around the cars. There's another row of cars over here on this side. The grass only burned around the cars because the cars are like an antenna or a conductor that draws the energy. It wasn't the grass burning that lit the cars on fire. It was the cars burning that lit the grass on fire, and or the same energy that burned the cars that was radiating out into the grass. But the line of cars is the antenna. And the grass didn't burn out here in the background. You can see all over it only burned. Here's a bunch of unburned grass out here, unburned grass out here. You'll see this all throughout. I'm going to hold it like that because the lighting made it come through well. Also, no rims. No rims. Very few of them are left with rims. This is a camera angle that they put in their news coverage. I didn't crop the photo, take a screenshot, zoom in, any of that. They put the camera down here at this level so you can look inside there and see that the engine is gone. Here you can see all the rivulets of molten metal that have since dried and cooled off and solidified, and you'll see these all around all of the vehicles. This thing is burned so bad you can't hardly even tell what it was. And I'm not sure if that's the engine left or if that's part of the transmission right there. But many of these do have the engine melted off and or the hood or doors melted off, completely missing. The grass is only 6 inches tall. Again, you can see the grass is unburned out here, unburned out here. It only burned around the cars. If it was a grass fire, it would have spread further. The grass was very easy to put out. The grass is only 6 inches tall. You could light that grass on fire and it could move underneath all of these cars without catching a single one of them on fire. There is not enough fuel in that 6 inches of grass to cause anything like what we're seeing. I think this might be the bed of the truck that we just looked at from the front side. Another thing is, it burns the license plates off on all of them. Notice here on this one, the back hatch is missing. I think I get a better shot of that, but since you can see it right here in this frame, I'll draw your attention to that now. There's Mr. Space Force again. Unburned grass here. Only partially burned here. It's brown compared to the black burn of the grass right around the cars. And you can see there's the cars. Right here is where the burn line on the grass stops. It only radiates out from where the energy was focused, which was on the cars. Again, how it burns the license plates off so effectively, I'm not sure. It probably has something to do with the makeup of the metal. And in these fires, like in Paradise, people have noticed that plastic makes it through the fire where everything else is destroyed. There'll be plastic garbage cans or plastic children's play toys and swing sets that make it through unscathed, while other things are completely destroyed. The hood is completely missing off of this car and off of this car. See if we can't zoom in to get a little better shot of the second hood back. Anyway, you can see 3 cars in a row are missing their hood. This one, and this one. Because the energy of a microwave draws towards the densest material. If you put a potato and a bread roll in a microwave for 1 minute and then pull it out, the potato is much hotter than the bread roll because it's denser, so it draws more of the energy and it cooks it from the inside out. Also notice the melted metal that comes out from the hood area on these, so it melts the rims. The door on this one is also missing. So the door is missing. And it looks like the door on the back side here is also missing. And the hood, and the hood, and the hood of that one over there. And I'm pretty sure that's a Jeep. Let's see if we can't zoom in a little further, because it's got the doors missing also. But I doubt it's because they took the doors off, because, you know, Jeeps can take their doors off. No, I'm pretty sure the doors on this Jeep were burned off, just like the hood is missing, just like the hood on this car is missing. Just like the hood on this car is missing. And here's the melted glass accumulated here. Again, that's tempered glass. It's created with high heat to give it greater strength. That stuff doesn't just melt from a little bit of grass underneath burning. There's no doubt this was plasma fire, and I'm not going to deal with detractors who want to correct me. I know what I'm talking about. I've been doing this long enough. Notice the unburned grass back here in the background. It stops right at the edge of where the rows of cars stop. And not a single car has any glass left. Some rims did not burn, others did. It's because of the compound of the metal alloy that it's made of, and whether or not that particular metal resonates with the frequency of this microwave energy that is burning these cars. Why it melts the door handles out of all of them, I don't know. Some people say, oh, that's just because they're plastic and they melt. No, to the contrary, in these plasma fires, oftentimes the plastic is what makes it through, while everything else conducts enough energy that it is destroyed. Every car is 100% burned and 100% rusted. There are no cars that are just half burned or a quarter burned or 3/4 burned. It's another good indicator. There's the melted mirror, which looks like it's actually in better shape than most of the rest of the car. You can still kind of see that there's a little bit of it left. The missing back hatch on this one. See the unburned grass right here in the background, just beyond the line. So the cars were definitely where the fire was focused. The grass burned secondarily. Unburned grass right up to the line of cars, and unburned grass here in the background, and the line of burned grass stops or fades out right there. That's the same missing back hatch, I believe. Zero doubt this is all plasma fire. There's a little better close-up. Might even be the same image. Missing hood, and this is the third one down there, and I think I get a better shot of that one. The following year, and the one after that, and every year since, we haven't been able to smell the smoke of these fires. Possibly because when the magnetic field opens, allowing that solar plasma, solar radiation in, possibly charging fiber optic laser weapons like the Athena built by Lockheed Martin, ozone also comes in and is why we no longer smell the smoke from these fires. Ozone is used as a deodorant. If you have a bad smell in your house you can't get rid of, there's little machines that emit ozone to get rid of it. I believe that's why we didn't smell the smoke after the first year. And here's that string of high voltage power lines, and the fire appears to be directly below these lines. So that electrical facility and these lines might have something to do with it. Not even that means it's directed. That could just be where the energy draws to when there's this natural release. And the cars provided an antenna. Even the fiber optic cable, the underground fiber optic cable works like an antenna, like a conductor of this energy. Jamie Lee used part of one of my videos in a video that he titled, "Don't Underestimate the Power of the Dark Fiber," a play on words from the Star Wars saying, "Don't underestimate the power of the dark side." But he talked about dark fiber optic cable that has been buried and is not lit up yet, isn't active, doesn't have anything flowing through it, but it still works as a conductor of this type of energy. And I proved this with my very first plasma fire video, where the little pole that sits next to the trench that says, "Caution, fiber optic cable buried below," had fallen over and gotten lasered right in half. Like, they put one of these little things standing at the edge of the trench. When they bury the fiber optic cable that runs underground, they put a little sign that says, "Caution, fiber optic cable buried here." And it melted right at the bottom and flopped over and was perfectly cut in half with such intense heat in the middle where it turned it to ash, and on both edges the hard plastic sign was still intact. Like there was such a high intensity of energy following along the line where that fiber optic cable was buried that when the little sign flopped over, it got lasered in half. So they say here, someone quoted that it looked like something out of a war zone. Head of the Department of Defense took a podium last year and acknowledged there are directed energy weapons that have been built by Russia and China, along with a couple other effects that he named off that they're capable of. Long-range fires. I made a video on this. I don't remember where it was. When people start to notice this stuff, and we have to absolutely 100% make sure that they don't catch on to the magnetic pole reversal, we can either say that it's these special directed energy weapons coming from the Ruskies and the Chinese and they can tell their people that it's us, or we can say that it's aliens. Because if we tell our people that it's the Russians or the Chinese, then there's going to be some major problems. But if we tell them that it's these alien invaders, we can still govern over the people. They will still turn to us for their solutions to this problem. And the fact that they don't actually have a solution is why this has not been used as a Hegelian dialectic problem-reaction solution, as they do with so many others. Don't let a good crisis go to waste, as Rahm Emanuel once said, along with many others. The reason they have not highlighted this crisis and then offered you the solution, because it is a greater priority to keep you unaware of the problem, because they don't have a solution. But once people start to become aware of it, they have to drive a narrative that makes you think that they could be the solution. Whether it's the Russians or the Chinese or the aliens, tell them anything, just don't let the people know that it's a magnetic pole reversal, and we have absolutely nothing to offer as far as solutions. Enter here the Project Bluebeam and telling people that this is all directed energy, when I have documented so much of it occurring in random locations where no one possibly benefits, that I have proven beyond a doubt this is not all directed energy. Though they do have the capability to direct this energy, and that is what they will do to drive the narrative, is make it very clear that this was directed in 1 or 2 instances, or 3 or 4, and then the public will see all of it as directed and not recognize the truth of what's happening. Magnetic pole reversal, PBS Nova, magnetic storm. Link is in the description. This is How Did the California Fires Really Start by Lords of Consciousness.
December 4th of 2017, a new round of wildfires hit Central California, which included the now infamous Thomas Fire. This has been by far the most destructive fire scene in California's recorded history. And you know, Brad, you live in California, as you mentioned, and you recently went to some of the areas most affected by the fires, and you took some really interesting photos. And I want to kind of give you the floor to kind of talk about them and talk about some of the bizarre nature of the destruction that you saw, how, you know, a lot of people are talking about how it doesn't match up to
map of California and all the geothermal features. Well, it was a warm day. It was right when we were having Hardly Strictly Bluegrass. One of my best friends who lives in Santa Rosa came down and stayed with me a couple nights, and we went to the shows. And that night he drove back, and when I woke up in the morning, I got a cryptic message from him that we're running for our lives. We're leaving our house. He was out of his house for about 2 weeks because of the smoke. Fires came within 1,500 yards of his house.
Notice here and throughout the rest of the video, all the trees are standing. All the houses are completely leveled. None of them are burned 50%, 25%, or 75%. All of the houses are burned 100%. All of those trees are still standing in between those houses.
So right away, people were saying that there were these blue lights. People were seeing them on the highway, like a blue mist, and as well as laser beams. And in fact, there are videos of blue laser beams coming down and creating mayhem, more fires, intensifying the fire. 3 different locations in Santa Rosa to see some of these burn sites. And I was actually very surprised that many of them are still there. I mean, all this stuff is right out there. And it was quite amazing to see some of the evidence that's still there, including round burn holes on the grass and the pavement. And then get this. So what happens is these DEWs, directed energy weapons, are highly powerful laser beams that heat up, that will heat up a location, not necessarily burn it, but there were so many sparks and embers in the air, it would be easy enough for those fires to catch on. So these round hole, and I told my buddies when we're driving up there, let's look for 3 things, and we found them all. Look for the molten aluminum and chrome, and we have that. I'll show you an example here in a second. I just got to go grab it. We found the round holes, and get this, we found it at this fence line where on one side there was nothing burned. On the other side, just the bottom of the fence poles were burned about a foot off the ground, like totally toasted on the ground, and then above it, we're fine.
This is one feature I'll need to draw your attention to, is these fence posts that he just said were only burned a couple feet off of the ground, the bottom couple of feet of the fence posts, because these are the exact same burn patterns that I have, yet the fence posts are 100% burned for the first foot or 2. That's the same exact pattern as can be seen here, where you can see the only thing remaining is the upper part of the fence posts.
In trailer homes, you know, trailer homes are mostly made out of metal, but they were just burned to the ground, toast, gone with warped metal, and oozing piles of aluminum coming from cars and stuff. And there were even reports of some of the beams going straight through the hood of a car and even through the block of a motor. So what we're talking,
and that's what I've spoken of before, that it is drawn to the densest part, which is the block of the motor. There have been plenty of fires in junkyards throughout history. It does not leave all the cars a bright orange rust. It seems that if it is being directed, it's being directed out into rural areas in order to keep it to mitigate the destruction when it hits populated areas, though there have been instances that I do believe it was a directed energy attack, such as Paradise, California, and of course the infamous 9/11. They ground it out in the middle of a rural area, a field, just like one of those plasma lamps, with a glass globe on the outside and a little wad of metal on the inside and all those little blue filaments of electricity dancing all around inside the globe. And then when you touch your finger to the globe of glass, it draws most of those little filaments of electricity to your finger. Maybe a similar process happens, and they can draw most of that ground current to wherever they want it. Either weaponize it and direct it at people and places, or when they see that it's going to happen naturally, direct it out into the middle of a field to mitigate. But it is my belief 99% of what I've documented cannot be directed as you normally think of it, because it is out in the middle of random fields and on random trees. So if it is being directed, it's intentionally being directed to minimize the damage.
Talking about is extreme localized heat sources where we're right across the way, right across the street, sometimes even just a few feet away, trees, untouched, unburned, had the needles on them. So it was the most selective forest fire on planet Earth, that it would just get rid of mostly trailer homes in Santa Rosa, and then many exclusive homes up in the mountains where there is.
Notice the straight line burn on that softball field. And yeah, sure, it takes a ride up here and curves again. The long straight line, fire does not do that.
It's known to be an underground base between Napa and Sonoma County. As well as, and I was trying to talk to Project Camelot to see if she wanted to do a show on this, that there's also a reported Men in Black underground base up by Cloverdale, and that town got burned up too. But keep in mind, there are 16 locations that caught fire that night. The number's actually up closer to 60. Some of them just get grouped together in the Tubbs fire, but it's really like 20 locations, and they just go like right along a street. This one we saw, it was a gun shop. They burned out the gun shop on 3 sides for commercial real estate untouched. And then they got a line of trailer homes. The fire had no beginning and no end, but it just decimated everything in between. So this fire is very peculiar. And by the way, CAL FIRE, who is responsible for determining the cause of these fires, still has no cause. None at all.
We also saw CAL FIRE, a man in a CAL FIRE uniform, standing in a truck that was also labeled CAL FIRE with a .50 caliber rifle that had a scope on it and cross sticks, dead resting on the top of the cab, standing in the bed, pointing forward out of the truck during the Paradise, California fires. To me, that's open and shut, means it was an attack. Whether they were imposters and they weren't really CAL FIRE, or CAL FIRE was in on it. That video existed. It's very hard to find, if even impossible these days. But I know there's people in the comments section of this video that will verify that they've seen it on multiple different channels at the time. This video is 4 years old, and 4 years ago there were multiple people who had that image of CAL FIRE with the .50 caliber rifle. All of those cars in Tianjin, China were burned exactly the same way. Holes in the block of the motor, rust on every single car, and it looked like there was probably 20,000 cars that got hit with some type of high-level energy. Now, he's about to say it's the tungsten rods of God. How did the California fires really start? In their thumbnail image, you can see the trees are standing and not burning, with only the buildings burning in between. Here, I'm just going to show you some more of the scorching of the rocks. See how this rock is scorched, highly scorched here, but completely untouched there? Wait for it. Watch my He-Man abilities. Wow, aren't I buff? Aren't I freaking buff? Or does it shatter the rocks? Scorched rock, it's scorched here. I'm not sure how well the lighting's being able to pick that up, but it's scorched here and unburned here. If that scorching was from a flame that moves across the ground, it would have scorched it evenly across. There wasn't that much more fuel here and nothing here. And so it goes with the rest of these rocks that are all scorched unevenly. Go over here to this post. What caught fire here? The cement? The rocks? The wire? And how did it not burn this part and charcoal this part? So, I think James True made a video today. Might even be a direct response to seeing this. Another good spot. How did one little spot like that burn without anything around it burning? That EBT and chalk body outline really don't see it. And that's harder for me to wrap my mind around. See how deep this indentation goes? It's not picking it up very well. But the charcoal in the middle, surrounded by unburned wood, while they can only see burnt sticks and twigs, it's harder for me to imagine that than the idea that they're shilling for big fence posts or they're agents of some sort of institution. And James even said that. He's like, well, if you want to think it's all being orchestrated by some organization, if that's where you still are, go ahead and keep thinking that. But maybe they're just not developed. And that's how this is a separation on the consciousness farm between those who are developed enough to see it and those who are not. Because it's real hard for me to try to fathom that after all the videos that I compiled and gave them, they still can see nothing but regular fire, and it's just nothing out of the ordinary. It's hard for me to imagine that they really don't see it. There's a good shot of how that's chewed out, completely charcoaled, and a fine line between burn and unburn. It's harder for me to imagine that they cannot see it than the idea that they're intentionally pretending not to see it. But maybe I should consider the idea that maybe they really don't see it. And this points towards James True's theory about the eye of Ra, how the amygdala regulates the dopamine and the melanin and controls what you can and cannot see based on how much it's going to freak you out. And it says, no, that's going to freak him out way too bad. Don't even let him see that. Just show him burnt twigs and sticks. So you want to keep shilling for big fence posts, that's your choice, man. What is it that burned this one? No matter how much evidence you put in front of them, they'll see what they want to see and not see anything but what they want to see. If they're being shown something they can't handle, the mind has a coping mechanism that automatically disables them from being able to see it. And so they block it out and they say, all I see is burnt sticks and twigs. And that little part in the middle that turned to charcoal, it must have been one of the embers blowing in the wind. Yeah, and they'll tell themselves whatever they got to tell themselves to maintain their ability to only see what they're capable of processing. And that's what James is referring to when he says emotional pedophilia. You think you think we're all the same, and that's the basis upon which I cannot comprehend that they wouldn't be able to see this, is the assumption that we're all the same. Maybe they are underdeveloped to the point where they cannot process this. This is an activity that we're participating in that they are not developed enough to participate in. So they compartmentalize it because it traumatizes them, etc. Maybe we're not the same. So this vertical board is completely gone, and it burned just right there. If a real fire goes out here also, not just burning where the two boards come together. Likewise here. Another good indicator is this straight line burn, how it's highly burned on this side of the board, unburned on this side. You see a little bit of burn right here, but there's that unburned strip in between. this burn, and that burn. So here it's completely charcoal, here it's completely unburned, and it's a perfect straight line going up and down the board. Try not to get my shadow in the way there. Fire don't do that. Fire would have this flame wrapping around the board and coming up this side too. And it does the same thing right here. Burns this inner edge of this board to charcoal, leaves this edge unburned, leaving a perfectly straight line, nearly perfectly straight line, all the way down. It's a little hard to get in there because the angle of the light. So, regular fire doesn't just burn in between the boards to charcoal and leave the surfaces unburned. Same pattern here. Burned on the inner edge of the board to charcoal. The outer edge completely unburned. Likewise here. You can see that perfectly straight line between the burn and unburn going all the way up the board. And it says up there, Cleveland, June 18th, 2022, grass and mulch fire.
What the hell is going on? That's a good one. Look at it. What's going on? Hey, what's going on? That's okay. That's a good one. Look at it. What's going on? Hey, what's going on? That's okay.
I've never seen it like this either. What is going on?
He said the same thing as the other guy.
What?
What's going on?
Yeah, so, anyways, the flats are on fire. So that's cool. It's just a bunch of mulch, fire trucks here. But, yeah, so pretty eventful day. Wildfires spreading out because this is literally lighting, like, pretty much everything on fire.
What?
Benton saying, I don't give a shit about plasma fire. Yeah, you don't give a shit until it's you in that house burning down. Then you will give a shit.
Reception was really bad down there, but if you take a look back there at those flames, that was a home, and you can see that is no more. That is gone. I mean, about 2 hours ago, it was still standing, but not anymore.
Okay, we're going to show you some plasma fire evidences. It's fresh plas. This post connected into this post right there, where you can see the carve out. This hardware, these 5 nails or so, 5, 6, 7 nails, however many there are, I just pulled them right out of here. There might still be one here. That one right there, I could probably pull that one out. And then there's this one hanging. So that's the hardware that connected them. See these burn holes in between the slats? How it burns highly on this edge, unburned here. I'm gonna run down here real quick and show you the evidence right down here on the grass rings where it burns out the inside of the grass ring and leaves the outer perimeter unburned. Right here. It's not the best one, but here you can see it's burned inside, unburned grass around the outer perimeter. Here, unburned around the edge, burned in the middle. We'll find a better one. Here's a pretty good one. Ash in the middle, unburned around the edge. This is a pattern that you can also see. Okay. Burned out in the middle here, unburned foliage around the entire outer ring of the tuft of grass. And this repeats over and over. Burned out in the middle, right here where there's ash, and you have standing weeds all around the edge. You can see this same pattern. Here's a good one. Burned out all the way in the middle, standing foliage all the way around the entire outer edge. This was one tuft of grass that grows like a grove of trees. There's the unburned ring around the edge with nothing but ash in the middle. Here's another one. Burned in the middle, unburned around the edge. And on it goes. They're all like this. Unburned around the perimeter. Burned in the middle, unburned around the perimeter. Find a couple more, but this is a pattern. Let me find one more thing I wanted to point out here for you. I was going to show you some steel belted radial that turned the tire to dust. But just remember this. Unburned around the edge. And you'll see that same pattern in a video that I titled "Two More Firefighters Armed with the White Hot Sword of Truth." At that fire, I point out that very pattern to those firefighters, how it's burned in the middle with an untouched perimeter. Felt like a delayed reaction or something. There you go. You can see the hardware is actually still hooking it in right there. And then it goes from 100% burn from there down to 0% burn. If this was emitting a flame, that flame would have come up and touched the outside of that. That's why I call them flameless forest fires. Because it sizzles it. Like when you put a hot dog in a microwave. This one's missing the bottom part. Like when you put a hot dog in a microwave for too long, and it comes out black and charcoal looking on the outside, but it never combusted. It never put out a flame, it just sizzled. Yeah. So that one's just missing the bottom foot. Right? That in some of these cases it can be directed intentionally as a weaponized attack, as appears to be the case in Paradise, California, when you can see Cal Fire standing on the back of one of their trucks in uniform with a .50 caliber rifle propped up on top of the pickup truck. That appears to be a coordinated, orchestrated attack.
Photo after photo after photo, you're going to begin to see that they all have the same look to them, and the look of just fire does not does not handle the story. Chicago, back in the 1950s, the Hessler, right, the Hessler panorama of 18, these look like solid brick stone buildings. These are the buildings that are burning down and that you're seeing pulverized. When you look at the photos, you don't see a lot of wood around. What you see is a lot of brick and stone virtually melted, and in many cases just sheared and hacked like almost like a knife has gone through them. This looks like Hiroshima after an atomic bomb. Like, am I looking at an atomic bomb or am I looking at a fire kind of thinking? So but it was in my head. He's like one of the top building contractors in this country, so I get called in. So he's seen lots of big fires, the results of them, because he's the one who has to figure out how do you rebuild this. What are we gonna put here? So he's seen the result. I showed him the photographs. He was clear. I've never seen any fire that looks like this. How fire has affected buildings, right? This is an expert. And where's the scorch damage? There's nothing here that indicates anything's been scorched. Anything has black fire damage. This is pulverized. You have to start wondering, what have we been looking at? It allowed city after city after city to burn to the ground, or are we looking at the remnants of continent-wide attack on human cities? But that seems to be a high possibility. And even when you look at Civil War photographs, the cities look the same. Even though they're claimed to have not been destroyed by fire, they're claimed to have been destroyed either purposely or in some sort of bombardment in the Civil War. And even when you look at the Civil War photographs, do you really think that the supposed cannon material and weapon material of the Civil War could really do that kind of damage? Like, how long would one of those cannons or 10 of those cannons have to stand at a building and reload and constantly put the balls in to take down building after building after building? How much would you need? So here's Baltimore, 1904. And again, what's interesting, notice how the telephone poles are fine. The fire has burned the buildings, has burned everything around them, but the telephone poles, or whatever these telegraph wires are, they're fine. Here, this is Toronto in 1904. The city's pulverized. That was San Francisco. Here again, that's I think Baltimore again. This one that's also Baltimore. Here's a part of a photo of San Francisco. This is Galveston, Texas. Right, so this is Galveston in 1885, and again, it's amazing to see that literally the brick and the stone have been melted almost to the point of complete pulverization, and the trees in the background are fine. We're looking here at New York. This is probably Chicago. We're looking here at 1849. This is St. Louis. Here's some screenshots I just made of the Chicago fire along the way. This one is, I think there's one of Boston in here. Yeah, the Great Fire of Boston. I mean, this looks like Dresden. In Germany. And I know what you're going to say. The firestorm was created, but the firestorm wasn't just a couple of guys lit some matches to some gasoline cans. I mean, there was thousands of tons of incendiary bombs put on the city in order to create that particular fire in Dresden. But this looks like Dresden, right? This looks like Dresden in 1945. And there's another one. There's that one in Chicago I showed you before. So we have to really ask what went on in these fires. I'm talking about the Chicago fire, which happened on October 8, 1871. Again, always claimed to have begun by a wayward cow knocking over a candle, right? Most of these fires have really goofy stories as to how they started. The first thing to realize is that this fire was not in isolation. There were 4 giant fires that day all along Lake Michigan. In Prestigo, Wisconsin, where 2,500 people died, Holland, Michigan, and Manistee, Michigan. 4 great fires on the same day in the same general location is too coincidental. Ignatius Donnelly, author and scientist, suggested in the 1880s that the fires must have been caused by a meteor strike. In 2004, physicist Robert Wood named it Bella's Comet specifically. The story that a running cow could have started this blaze in Chicago is a nice story for kids to believe, like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus, so as to not have to do any real thinking about it. Yet anyone close to Chicago at the time would have seen through the cow story right away, especially with 3 other serious fires close by at the same time. During the Prestigo fire, a local priest was quoted as suggesting that things came from the sky causing the fires, which could be meteors, but it could mean many things. All he said was things coming from the sky. Because what is for sure, when looking at the photos of above, we're not seeing fires. And the same becomes true when we look at the photos of the other city fires, and even when we look at artwork of the 15 and 1600s that depict balls of light falling into burning cities, balls that could even look like modern missiles. So what happened? Yeah, I'll tell you, in here I have the exact quote that my building contractor said to me when he looked at the fire photos. He said, "Who bombed this city? Because this damage is not from a fire. Look, all these buildings were stone, not wood, and the stone is flaking off. That's serious damage. A simple fire cannot do this to stone. Take the cathedral in Paris that just burned down. Yeah, Notre Dame. The ceiling burned because it was made of wood, but the stone structure of the building turned out fine. A bit of soot damage, a bit of change to color, but that's it. Now look at these photos. What has done this to the stone? This really needs to be examined further." Portland, Maine, Boston, Toronto, it doesn't matter. The fires look like the brick and stone have been pulverized. We have some more oddities with these fires. The first is one that while they cause tremendous damage, almost no one has claimed to have died in them, like 1 or 2. would not many have been swept up, especially if it happens at night, caught in the upper floors of buildings, the building collapses on them, maybe a few deaths or maybe a few people actually even jump to commit suicide to try to save themselves, or, We also have really odd photos of people posing for selfies, like the day after the photograph, particularly maybe army soldiers or policemen or city officials, and they're posing almost like the way you would in front of, just after you've won a trophy. Like if you've just won a championship and you take your photo with the trophy, that's how a lot of these pictures look. They're really, really strange. Some in the alternative history research community believe that these fires might have been plasma discharges in some way from the sun, either from the sun or the dome firmament, depending who makes the suggestion. Others see them as deliberately started, perhaps EMP devices, in order to destroy many of the old buildings in the cities or kill off the inhabitants as quickly as possible. It tends me to believe that these fires from the 1800s may have been some form of microwave attack, because if you put aluminum or aluminum or metal in a microwave and turn it on, it'll quickly catch fire. But if you have broccoli or a carrot next to it, nothing will happen to them other than they'll get a bit wilted and soggy. And this is again what we see in these photos, right? Like this Galveston, Texas. The buildings have been pulverized and burned, but the trees around turned out fine. So what happened here? Was it a fire? Was it a fire, as it was said? Some sort of bombing attack? An EMP or microwave attack that could target buildings, perhaps even specific buildings and areas? A few have even claimed that this is the result of an H.G. Wells real-life War of the Worlds alien attack and takeover of the Earth. I'm not going to say that that's true, but again, since we have no idea what really occurred here, every option has to be kept on the table as possibility. Just to recall, H.G. Wells wrote that story in the 1890s in England, almost at the end of this fire phenomenon, when most of the fires had already been completed, and it's right at the time that all these giant World's Fairs are starting to pop up all over the United States. Again, something in this right away told me that everything about our history, all of our foundation, is in some goofball way linked to these World's Fairs. That these World's Fairs are like a lighthouse, that if we can uncover what the World's Fairs are really doing and what they're telling us, it'll start uncovering answers like this of what really happened with these fires. Another question we have to ask is, just because the photo of a fire says 1871 Chicago or 1889 for Seattle, and that's when we have reports from it, we have to ask, are we sure that's when the fire happened? Because what if the fire happened in 1771 or 1789 and they just changed the date for us? Granted, they would have had to have photography at the time, which is quite possible. We don't know the real history of photography. But because we believe that the history of photography didn't start until 1830, because that narrative is presented to us so strongly, if we see a photograph and someone tries to tell us it's from 1800, instantly the natural result is they didn't have photography, so you're wrong. But if that narrative is different, if photography can be pushed back deeper and deeper and deeper into the past, then the dating for a lot of these photographs becomes much more questionable. Again, I'm just throwing that out there. So we may also speculate, one other speculation again, is the fires are listed as being 100 cities over 50 years. So one fire in 1848, one in 1850, two in 1852, two in 1855, two in 1850. I'll put the Wikipedia link below. There's a Wikipedia page that it just lists fires in the 1800s in North America. It's crazy. But what if that long 100-year period is not wrong? What if the fires really happened over a much shorter period of time? And again, if you change the dates a little bit, say you make all the fires 1860 to 1867. People would be asking a lot more questions of how do 150 major cities all get burned up in 7 years when the Civil War is supposed to be going on, but cities all over North America that shouldn't have any fighting going on, and that's the time they all are listed as burning down. People would have to start asking questions of Richmond, Virginia supposedly burns because of the fire. Why does Boston then burn in the same year? That doesn't make any sense. So it's one of these things that perhaps almost presenting a longer period of these makes people not ask more questions, right? Whatever happened in the 1800s, a time period that I studied it a bit, but this kind of stuff, this was never taught in my university courses. This was never suggested, hey, 100 cities all burned down from a fire, all because they supposedly built wood buildings and didn't have a very good fire department. Okay, that's one theory, but we got others, and we don't know which one is true. Some way it bugs me, at least I didn't do it some documentaries, I'm sure you watch them, particularly these historical documentaries, they start the thing with the answer to whatever is coming is found by these archaeologists, and then, oh, really, they got the answer. And then they show the 1 hour of them, I don't know, digging somewhere and talking about some statue. And at the end of the documentary, they found actually nothing. And so they lied at the start of the documentary, saying they have an answer and they don't. So I'm hopeful that I'm not ever telling you in these videos I've got answers, because I wish they did. All we can start, I think, to do is do something very similar to how Richard Rose talked about how you find truth, which is don't go looking for what you believe, don't go looking for what you want the answer to be, go looking for false. Find in whatever story or whatever you're digging into, be it yourself, spiritual teachings, history, science, it doesn't matter, and find what's false. And as soon as you find something false, you can discard it. Well, that's not true. Look for something else, false, discard it. And eventually, as you discard more and more and more false, what will be left will be the truth. No matter how much you might like it or how nice or awful the truth it might be, it'll be the one thing you can't discard. And these city fires have that element to them that we have to start with as best as we can, eliminating what's not true. And that all of these cities could have gone through an accidental fire just instantly screams false, particularly, like I say, when these number of building contractors that I know disagreed with this. But going back to the start of Corbyn's question, was this some kind of coordinated attack or just stupidity? And I'd have to lean to some sort of coordinated attack. And I'd have to lean then to it's in some way related to whatever would happen to the world before this happened, the world of, I hate to use the term that's floating around the internet now with the big T name, I don't want to use that word, but just a sort of a worldwide, highly advanced civilization that was around in the 16, 17, 1800s that were building these things we now call cathedrals and the buildings that were the World's Fairs, and then all of a sudden seemed to just stop. That the fires are related to this change. You would think after a certain number of fires have broken out in cities all over the country, the other cities would start to think, hey, the likelihood of it happening here is pretty high. We should begin making plans to deal with it. Cities seem to never make plans to deal with it.
What the hell's going on? That's a good question. And I may have an answer. People have been reporting all over California and taking pictures, as you clearly see, of these beams coming down from the heavens. Well, by God, Ron Hilton, that's just a fire tornado there. No. The eyewitnesses said it was there for just a minute or two and it's gone. No fire tornado. These are beams. These are literal beams coming out of the sky. And that's not the only set of pictures we got. I got more, man. Check that shit out. Yeah, coming out right out of the sky. People's got pictures. That's the beauty of everybody having a cell phone these days. They can snap all pictures. Look at all that shit, man. What the hell? Beams coming out of the sky. What's up with that shit? We have an answer for that, too. Santa Rosa, California. What type of forest fires leave trees intact but vaporize homes without a trace? Appliances, granite countertops, toilets, textiles, stonework, etc. completely vanished. Firefighters reported it's like we've been nuked. Never seen anything like it. On the other hand, military intelligence agencies recently announced publicly that they've been testing directed energy weapons. DEWs, DEW, directed energy weapons, mounted on the aircraft, as you see right here. Alright, so could these directed energy weapons be what's causing these beams? Well, that's a pretty damn good possibility, isn't it? But the plot gets even thicker, because it turns out that there is a high-speed rail system, and the wildfires, quote-unquote, line up exactly in the same path as the California high-speed rail system. Isn't that interesting? Pretty interesting, isn't it? Now you say, well, that's a coincidence, Vaughn. Yeah, yeah, and my name is Rumpelstiltskin. Yeah, come on, man. Come on, there ain't no dummies here, alright? There's no dummies here. What's going on, man? Something is amiss, alright? It just is. Something is definitely amiss. What the hell do I know? But yeah, interestingly enough, we've got beams coming out of the sky. We've got planes with all kinds of directed energy weaponry on them. We've got Santa Rosa, California that looks like goddamn Beirut. And we've got a high-speed rail system that until just recently, California didn't have enough land to build it with. And now, thanks to the forest fires, now they've got all this land to build it with. Isn't that just ducky? Isn't that amazing how that shit works? That's not a normal car fire, guys. It's not. I've seen many, many car fires. Alright, I've seen car fires. That's not one of them. Whatever hit that car had enough heat to literally melt the aluminum rims to liquid form. Unbelievable. You know, that is some severe devastation. And I really don't know what to say about that shit. Because that's crazy. That's just fucking insane, man. Ain't a single tree singed. Not one. Not one tree is singed. How do you explain that? You can't. Look at that shit, man. Look at all the trees, man. Something is not right, folks. Okay? It's just not. You know, you can make all kinds of excuses all day long, but the truth of the matter is that something's just not right. It's just not. I'm sorry, but it's just not. Well, it was an ember that flew through the air and miraculously landed on a house out in the middle of nowhere, with no other signs of any type of burning whatsoever, nowhere. Governor of California, President Pro Tem of the Senate, Speaker of the Assembly, State Capitol, Sacramento, California. Dear Governor and legislative leaders, I requested a joint legislative audit committee. The California State Auditor presents this audit report regarding the California High-Speed Rail Authority contracting control practices. This report concludes that the authority's flawed decision regarding the start of high-speed rail system construction in the Central Valley for a wide range of high-value contracts have contributed to billions of dollars in cost overruns for completing the system. The authority began construction in the Central Valley in October of 2013 despite being aware of the risks associated with beginning construction early. The fact that the authority had not acquired, listen, the fact that the authority had not acquired sufficient land for building. Well, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Looks like they got the land now, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Come on, don't shout me down when I'm preaching good. It looks like they got the land now, doesn't it? Directed energy weapons. The fires follow the exact path of the high-speed rail. Homes that are completely vaporized without a trace. Folks, granite is hard. Really hard. Okay? No signs of porcelain. Porcelain withstands heat, folks. It does. Ask anybody. Porcelain can withstand a great deal of heat. But yet there is no toilets, no sinks. Nothing made out of porcelain is left. Nothing made out of granite is left. Well, how convenient for the California forest fires to come up, because by golly, now they've got the land that they needed. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing?